Look, boys and girls, the only reason there are white people is because black people came here first. And they faded as they moved farther and farther north from the equator. Their melanin faded so that their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. Their brains didn't get smaller, but their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. That's the only reason you children can call yourselves white. And you aren't white. We are all shades of brown.
Before we get started, do me a solid. Don't forget to smash up the likes. I'd really appreciate that. Welcome to the Chesley Major channel, Chesley Major Media. I'm your host, Chesley Major, and we about to do it real major. Let's get into it. What's going on, fam? Ladies and gents, majors and majorettes. Welcome to Chesley Major Media. And I'm warning you, today is going to be a flamer. I brought some video with me that's going to explain to the T what white privilege is and who benefits from it. It's not black people. How'd you guess? Also, I'm going to be discussing anti-black racism. So without further ado, let's dive into it.
A secret about white people. Every single white person knows somebody who is racist. Racist towards black people, racist towards Spanish people. We all know somebody. It might be our family member, might be a distant relative, might be a coworker, might be an old friend, but we all know somebody. Personally, I come from a whole family of racist people. Yeah, my entire family is Republican too, okay? My dad's parents are racist, and my mom's parents are racist, okay? So I'm literally going against everything by talking about this. I am putting my own life on the line by speaking about this, and that's what we all should be doing. See, we could have ended this a long time ago, but people like my mom listened to these racist comments that their parents were making and didn't speak out against it. They kept their mouths shut, or they agreed with them silently, you know, but they didn't do anything about it. They continue to let this be passed on generation after generation. Oh, my mom never told me or taught me any racist ideologies. She continued to let it happen because she didn't speak out against it when her parents were talking about it, or my dad's parents were talking. So if you are against racism and you are against discrimination and you're a white person, you need to speak out about it. Otherwise, you are allowing this to continue generation after generation, and you are just as much a part of the problem as anybody else.
I grew up in a conservative white family, and I know there's been a lot of discourse about whether white people should talk about racism, and here's my argument for why I think that not only should we, but we have to. A lot of racism in white families occurs behind closed doors. I've been over at friends' parents' places and heard them say some pretty obscene things about people of color, assuming that I am on their side simply because I am white. Obviously, this makes for some awkward conversations when I do call them out, but point being, the depths of the racism and the darkness that seeps in deeply into these families can only, in my opinion, truly be exposed by other white people, because they will never be their full racist selves around anyone who is not white. They like to save face publicly and say that they're not racist, but then again, if you go into their homes and you hear the things they say, that would suggest otherwise. I just encourage you, if you're a white person and you know people like this, please say something. Don't just ignore it for fear of conflict.
And I was kind of raised, to be us against them. I know that if I see a group of white kids and I see a group of black kids, I'm going to be more on guard with the black kids because of the way that I was trained, the way I was raised. I'm just trying to, I guess, be really honest. It's a really harsh thing to say, and I don't want to say it, and I know that people are going to take it wrong, but I know that I'm racist and I don't want to be. I don't mean to be. I'm trying not to be. I'm trying to, and that's kind of what we're doing here, is how do I not be? When it's been ingrained to me for my whole life. I'm 60 years old. So my daughter is mixed, and we never really had a conversation about how that affects her.
I went to a mostly white school. I would get called names a lot. They'd call me like brownie, or like racist names, or they'd call me Like monkey, like a monkey. I didn't really know that I was racist. I'm confused with my identity.
So he's speaking on it because it affects his family, but most white people who don't have blacks in their family are quiet. But let's dive back into it.
And at the same time, I'm going to hopefully learn what can I do to be more conscious about being racist.
We're just going to have real, honest conversations. What do you think's wrong with you?
Not good enough.
According to who?
To the white man.
I do say racist stuff, and I don't mean, a lot of it's out of humor.
How does it make you feel?
Uncomfortable and angry.
But what if your jokes and your words harm?
Now I can't even laugh. I know I'm going to be challenged. I know I'm probably going to get angry.
I think there will be, at points in our journey, just some harsh but transformational moments.
I think it's going to be beneficial, though.
So as you know, racism has always been prevalent in the church ever since the beginning of Christianity in America. Question is, how can you serve God and be so cruel to his people? But let's check this video out.
Of 15 predominantly white congregations from a suburban Atlanta town.
The youth pastor at First Baptist Church of Decatur.
And they're offering words of repentance, confessing for their church's role of racism in the past.
We name this unequivocal truth. We speak to you as white ordained leaders of Decatur churches that for generations have sought to be faithful to the gospel of Jesus Christ.
However, our beloved churches have fallen short of our call and commission to live fully into Christ's call because we have embraced the self-serving corruption of systemic racism.
Too many of our Decatur churches were planted in soil tainted with racism. Too many of our Decatur churches harvested the fruit of that racism.
And like too many of our predecessors, we who now serve as your shepherds have been too silent, too complicit in those systems because they benefit us.
As the prophet Jeremiah writes, we have treated the wound of God's people carelessly, saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace.
No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.
Back in the days of slavery, they used to hang people and say it's in the name of God. Now that's wicked. But let's get back into it.
Clergy have long told us that systemic racism is not only embedded in our city, our state, and our nation, it is also embedded in our churches and in us, your clergy.
We have been silent. We will no longer be silent. As white clergy, we must engage in the faithful, ongoing work of dismantling racism, anti-blackness, and white supremacy, beginning with ourselves and our churches.
Our posture must be one of humility and decentering. We must listen to and follow the leadership of our Black clergy colleagues who have led this work for so long, and support their work with our labor and resources.
Being anti-racist and pro-justice is not separate from the work of the church.
Now that sounds all good and dandy, but if you really want to make amends, you can start by supporting reparations.
The whole history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember, during the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people. I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real, right? But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about killing each other. That's what we did in Europe. We just killed each other before we figured out there were other people to kill. We just killed each other, right? I mean, that was the history of Europe. The English hated the Irish, right? Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody, and everybody hated their ass right back, right? There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count, that's why. And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, you know, in the colonies, the colonial elite looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants, who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up, and they were like, damn, we got to figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another, or they're going to rise up and take our stuff, right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote-unquote white folks who were poor Europeans are going to figure out they're all getting played by these rich people. Right? So ultimately, the rich figure out they got to come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team. The easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right? Because at least they look like you. They sort of share some of the customs and the culture. So they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness, and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're going to let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man.
Notice he kept saying, if you're a man, because them folks always oppress their women. Black men have never oppressed their women. Yet, the white woman was able to get the black woman to spearhead the effinism movement that has helped destroy the nuclear family, while at the same time run the black community into the ground.
And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude. No more of that, because you're too good for that. And we're going to take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line. Give them a horse and a gun and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor. They still don't have anything. They didn't pay the slave patrol well, right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped because the divide and conquer had begun to work. Right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown.
So as you can see, Mr. Tim Wise, he already has it down to a science, and he's telling it like it is, straight up. No sugarcoating. He's telling it straight. Now, I could have explained it to you, but I'd rather they do. Let's get back into it.
Like, how the hell, why would you do that? Why would you go fight to protect my property rights when you don't own anything? The only way you would do it is if that rich person comes to you and says, hey, listen, you gotta go fight because we gotta maintain our way of life, because if these people get free, they're gonna take your jobs. No, fool, they already got your job. That's how it works, right? Because if I'm white and I gotta charge you $1 a day to work on the farm, but you can get a black person to do it for nothing because you own them, guess who got the job? Free got the job, right? So in a sense, poor white folks would have been better off joining with black folks to overthrow the slave system. That would have raised the wage floor of all working people. But they got tricked by rich white men telling them that their enemies were black and brown. Fast forward to the 1930s. And you have white labor leaders. They're not even the elite, right? The labor leaders are not the elite, but they're the elite within the labor movement. And even they had fallen for it at this point, so they didn't want to integrate their unions.
The New York Times reports investigators trying to learn why a gunman murdered at least 8 innocent people, including children, at a Texas mall, are examining a social media profile rife with hate-filled rants against women and black people, and they believe those belonged to the gunman. The shooter's profile also includes language praising Hitler, with references to neo-Nazi websites like the Daily Stormer. The shooter's Hispanic heritage would include him in the growing number of non-white extremists pushing a white supremacist ideology. You've infiltrated some far-right extremist groups yourself. You know their thought process in trying to lure in more people to spout off their disgusting rhetoric. There is a misconception that all white nationalists have to be white. But let's look at Hispanic white nationalists like Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio and online political activist Nick Fuentes. What have you seen in regards to non-white people becoming advocates for white supremacist ideas?
The Latino identity, the Hispanic identity, the Latinx identity is incredibly complex. It is not exclusively a race. It is not exclusively an ethnicity. It creates a lot of room for extremist views like white supremacy. One of the phenomena that we've seen over especially recent years is misinformation, disinformation, and radical narratives being pushed into Spanish-speaking communities. This particular guy, this disgusting shooter in Texas, he's someone who acknowledged his Latino identity, and he expressed on his social media displeasure at not being traditionally considered white by his peers. But he's someone who embraced extremism because he was basically a loser. That was his way to find a sense of community. That was his way of finding purpose. And now that type of extremism is being promoted by folks like Enrique Tarrio, like you mentioned, like Nick Fuentes.
So there it is. Like I said, a lot of these Latinos, not all, I'm just saying, a lot of people from the Caribbean period practice anti-black racism. They've imported it from their country. They want to be white so bad.
White privilege describes advantages and benefits people have simply because they are white. This privilege occurs on many levels in society. It is often not seen by white people because it's the experience they know. White privilege is interacting with the police and other authorities without fear of being profiled based on skin color. It's living in a neighborhood without facing discrimination. Having parks and grocery stores nearby. It's knowing you will be treated fairly by the teachers in your classroom. Recognizing white privilege acknowledges the injustices that Black, Indigenous, and people of color experience that white people don't. It does not mean white people live free of hardships, but that racism isn't one of them.
Nothing more American than black folks. That's just facts. Built this whole damn country for free. Every brick, every rail, every road laid with blood and sweat that never got a paycheck. And what did they get in return? Chains, whips, red lines, nooses, Jim Crow, COINTELPRO, prisons, knees on necks, bullets in backs. Ain't no other group forced to love a country that hates them like this. That's strength. That's America. 400 years of free labor built the economy. Cotton alone was worth $3 billion in 1860. That is trillions today. Wall Street, founded on slave trade. The White House, built by enslaved hands. Every dollar ever printed got black labor backed into it. But tell a racist that and they act like it's a history opinion. They fought in every war. Crispus Attucks bled first for this country in 1770. Black soldiers saved America in the Civil War. Hell, World War II fought Hitler while getting lynched at home. Vietnam drafted in disproportionate numbers. The thanks they got? GI bills blocked, housing loans denied, neighborhoods flooded with heroin by their own government. Look it up. And you still got racists yelling, "Go back to Africa," like they ain't the original stolen property. Malcolm X said it best. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock landed on us. Ain't that the truth? Black folks got every right to hate this place, but they stay. They fight. They create. They revolutionize. America wouldn't exist without them. And it damn sure would collapse without them.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I want to give a big major salute to the African Diaspora channel for the footage. You all appreciate it. Also, next time someone talks about black people being lazy and their people coming to this country with nothing and working hard to get everything they had and want, just refer back to this video. We've been here for hundreds of years, putting in work, standing on business, fighting for freedom, justice, and liberty for all. And that's the problem. We've been fighting for everybody, but no one has been fighting for us. And now that we've been delineating and standing on business, it's all about us. Black first. Everybody else, secondary. Taking care of our own is necessary. Like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Get down in the comments section. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about white people telling the truth about racism and white privilege. I am Chesley Major. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.